This is Flintlock, the Siege of Dawn. We're here on Xbox Series X taking a look at the latest generic Dark Souls-esque experience. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. That's right, if you've been looking for yet another Dark Souls game, well, this one's going to be right up your alley. They've essentially taken the gameplay of God of War and done not as great of a job with it, and threw that into basically a Dark Souls-like setup, which is, like I said, not the greatest of experiences. This one is a bit tedious, a bit exhausting, and just not really a whole lot of fun to play. It's kind of bizarre. So we've got two different graphical options here in order to enjoy what this has to offer. So right now, this is the performance mode, which is the default. It's 1440p at 60 FPS. Now, I have noticed that there are some performance hiccups here or there in regards to kind of like the odd stutter in some situations. But I think most people just aren't really going to notice that is a problem. Or that it pops up. It's not really a big issue, and it's just mostly that the resolution kind of looks a little... It just doesn't look super sharp, if that makes sense. And then we can go to quality mode. We'll apply the setting there. There's also different options. I guess if you do switch the difficulty from normal to something easier, then you can't earn achievements, which is fun. And it kind of sucks, and there's accessibility options too that might help you out. But yeah, when we switch to the quality mode, you can tell that there is an immediate bump up in terms of the fidelity of the game, like a massive increase. And this is a native 4K resolution at 30 FPS. Although, honestly, it does seem like it chugs, and I don't know if that's just because of the drop to 30 FPS, but it is... not a very pleasant switch up in terms of kind of switching it up. This is something I think would be more interesting to check out on a future console, with it potentially becoming something that gets like uncapped, if that makes sense. That would be kind of neat. I could see this really kind of showing the potential of this game, but I would not recommend an experience where you are doing like... in a game where it's really kind of janky and awkward to hit things and react to stuff like this one has, I would not recommend a game performance mode where, like, you know, it's like this. It's just, it makes it a lot harder, and it's very, very unnecessary to have that, like, extra sense of difficulty. Because this one, it's not hard, I suppose, but it's just kind of like, I find this really boring. I've played a fair bit of it, and then I got to a boss, and it's just like, you're essentially like the boss. You're doing no damage, and you're supposed to kind of like go and grind items to upgrade your gear, because there's not like a leveling system, as to say. There's like a skill tree for different categories, and that skill tree will make you a little stronger. So I guess it encourages you to essentially just sit there and grind the same enemies over and over and over and over again, and then you get enough points. And you also, when you kill enemies in an area, you have to like hold left on the D-pad to get like the full amount of points, and it's just... it's really, really annoying and tedious, like I said. So you're not really necessarily getting better, but you can find kind of loot. It feels like it's got like a really half-baked like RPG aspect into it. Like, it's very much a Souls-esque game. You know, enemies respawn. You go, and the gameplay loop of this just isn't very good either. It's the most predictable Dark Souls thing ever. You're like, okay, you move forward, there's some enemies, you can kill them, you can walk by them, whatever. Then you get to like a hamlet, and you fight a boss, and then you get to go to this tea house. They give you a health vial. Then you go to the next area, fight through like this hamlet thing, fight through this area, go to the edge of the hamlet and fight a boss, and then you rinse and repeat over and over and over again. There are some variations within the environments that you visit, but it largely is just doing the same thing over and over again. And then this game has this kind of armor system that could be a little annoying, where essentially these guys are like super tough with their armor. You're supposed to like kind of peel it away with certain moves, and yeah, and there's dodging and there's parrying is a big part of it. And yeah, it's just like I said, I really am just tired of this genre of game. Like it feels so derivative. Like these guys, their prior title was Ashen, which is basically just like Dark Souls, but you know, it was a little earlier on in that sort of, I guess you would say, gaming era. And then this is just, again, basically they just shoved God of War type gameplay, and not as good God of War type gameplay, into a Dark Souls sort of container, and it just isn't very good. I wasn't really too into like the character's story and stuff either. You're basically on the front lines of, like, the setting is neat. Like you're basically a group of, you know, like Flintlock type, like you basically got these really old kind of to reload guns and stuff, and pistols and hand cannons, and you know, the gunpowder era, and then you're like fighting in trenches against like these creatures and stuff, and there's the gods are everywhere, and the whole point of the game is you go kill the gods, or you want to kill the gods, because there's this like demon gate of skeletons coming out. But like hilariously, you immediately meet this god, and then you're like best buds going on this adventure. You try to kill the gods, and then he electrocutes you, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll just be pals, but if you betray me, I'll stab you. But it's like, obviously the god could easily kill her. Yeah, it's like, the dialogue isn't too annoying. I just don't find the dynamics of these characters too interesting. And I just kind of find this lead character a little, I wouldn't say wooden, but just not very, like, interesting. It just seems like a very generic kind of character. I guess the movement's kind of fun in terms of doing the double hopping, but it's like I said, everything's kind of janky. Doing the dodges, the combat, the parries, the movement. A lot of it just feels, as I said, it feels kind of janky. It's just not super smooth and great in a genre where we're starting to see pretty smooth, pretty well refined, you know, kind of Souls-like games. It just really feels like another drop in the bucket for like a genre I'm seeing like bi-weekly at this point, which is just getting ridiculous. Like I'm trying to find something that makes this like really stand out as something that is unique and intriguing, and I struggle to really find it. Like I don't really get what this brings to the table as being something different. Like if you know, played one Dark Souls game, yeah, played them all. It's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. And, like, you know, if you are looking for your Dark Souls flavor of the week, I guess this is kind of the game for you. If you are wanting something a little different, I genuinely don't think this one offers anything too different. You're basically, you know, randomly getting armor stuff, some different abilities. I don't know. And then the bosses are just like, there's like very large bosses that are just silly in terms of like how much damage you do, and yeah, a lot of it's just kind of like, it just feels kind of dumb. like it genuinely just feels kind of silly. And I played it for quite a few hours, and I was just kind of like, I really just didn't, like, I was bored like literally right off the bat. You can tell that it's kind of like, it's double A for sure. Like it's not like full scope kind of AAA thing, and that's fine. But I've been seeing a lot of really, really good looking games recently, and this one just, I don't know, like it looks okay, but it just doesn't feel as to scope as some of the other stuff I've been kind of experiencing recently, and that to me is a little bit of a bummer because, you know, I'm looking for more kind of impressive stuff as the gen goes on, and you know, there's a place for different AA type games, and I don't mind playing these types of games, but I also played something like, was it Banishers not too long ago, which I think has some elements that feel similar to this, while not being, you know, a complete pain to play and not fully leaning to the Dark Souls thing. I would have actually liked this a lot more if it was just a run-of-the-mill kind of action hack and slash. Would have been more enjoyable. I don't see the point of making this have like a weird Dark Souls grind to it. It literally, like, functionally, it doesn't make sense to me that they would do that with this game. Like, I don't get what this brings to the table is the thing, right? Like what makes this interesting? What makes this fun? I just didn't really find any of that. It's like, it's not like I could really just level and stuff. Like, it's weird to get to a point where you're kind of moving through the game, you're jumping through stuff, you're fighting things, and then you get to a boss and it's just like, well, what are you expecting me to do against this thing when you do like little inches of damage? It's like, what is the point? You want me to go and like, because it's like an open world kind of thing, but like there's not unlimited stuff to do. You're basically just like retreading the same areas, looking to kill the same enemies to maybe like improve your point skills a little bit, or find a new weapon that does slightly more damage, or find resources that will allow you to do slightly more damage. It's just like weird, right? Like I literally don't quite get the appeal of this one in that way, because it's like, yeah, I've played a lot. Like, I've played a lot of these games. Let's be real here. I'm sure you've seen it on the channel. I've done so many videos of games like this, and there's a certain, like, especially some nights I just sit there and I'm like, I just want nothing to do with this genre. I'm just like, no, I don't want to play this. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure I could sit here and I could, like, you know, work on the moves and be like, okay, he telegraphs this, I do that, and, you know, and sit there for like 20-30 minutes fighting the same boss thing over and over again. But there's sometimes where I literally just sit there and I'm like, I do not care enough about this experience to do that. It's like, I just, at the time of this coming out, like, I just grinded through that Elden Ring DLC, and that just has so much of a better level of Souls-like polish that I don't get what you're getting new here. And I think that's a problem. It's like, you know, you can do your own Souls games, everybody in the industry seems to be doing that constantly, but like, you need to bring something different to the table that like makes it interesting, like a really cool main character, a really cool concept grab, something different. And it's just like, I don't really get what's different or interesting about this game. It just feels like generic fluff. Which, as I said, if you're into the Souls-like games, this might be the generic fluff for you, I guess you would say. It's just whether or not you want something that is different, or if you're fine just kind of playing the same thing all the time. I want the... It's locked at this location? Are you kidding me? Why would that be locked at this location? Yeah, it's just kind of tedious. It really does feel like a last-gen game, though, that they've kind of just awkwardly ported over to this one. I think the setting could have been so much more, but yeah, it just kind of gives me vibes of other things I've played and maybe found a little bit more interesting. Like, even the movement mechanics in times, it's just like, you really do feel like you're doing the same thing. Hopping over an area, flying across the sky as this creature thing. It's just, yeah, I don't know. It feels like too many other games, and it doesn't have, like, its own identity. It feels like one of those games where I'm gonna have, like, done this video here, and then if I, you know, future Xbox or whatever comes out down the road, and I, like, totally forget that this exists, and someone will be like, oh, you should revisit this one, and I'd be like, oh, that one. Yeah, I forgot this was a thing. It feels like that kind of game where it's just sort of another Dark Souls drop in the bucket. Which, as I said, you know, if you are into this genre, right, like, this is just another Souls game, so you might appreciate this more than someone like myself that's sitting here being like, ugh, you know, another run-of-the-mill Souls, because it's just the gameplay loop. They need to, I don't know how to describe it, they need to evolve the gameplay loop. That is my big thing. I really want to see some kind of Souls-like evolution on what you do in these types of games, because it just, like, it's just always the same sort of thing. And it's like, oh, cool, you know, you get flint-type weapons and stuff, which is interesting, but not enough where I'm like, oh, wow, this is really changing my experience up. And, you know, they've tried to do some, like, little things with the skulls and stuff, but I don't know, like, just what is the big appeal on this one that makes it so much different? Like, I literally feel like I'm just playing as, like, a Kratos stand-in. You know, the kid boy is just replaced with, like, a dog thing. And it's just like a Dark Souls loop. And I'm like, I'm sure it's, for the devs, it's probably a big ambitious effort, but it feels more like they literally play other games, and instead of just being inspired by them, they just literally make derivative works. And that's a bit of a shame, because it seems like, you know, with the, I would say, to a degree, polish, like obviously I think there's a bit of jank with this one, as I mentioned, especially the movement and stuff. It doesn't feel as tight as it really should for a Souls-like game. Like, there's obviously talent here, I would say, at this studio, for sure. And I feel like they could be making much, much more original kind of content. Because you take something like this, you take this kind of gameplay, this movement, this style, and you apply it into a scenario where you're doing something with a bit more of a focused narrative and a bit more of an interesting setup. And I think you've actually got a pretty solid AA game where you could be, you know, really punching above your sort of studio's weight class and stuff like that. But I mean, if you do tap into that Souls crowd, I mean, you know, obviously there's a lot of people that like playing these types of games. But I'm just saying, like, the potential for them to really kind of build from this point, if they get the opportunity to, just focusing more on story and something a little bit more fun and engaging and different, with this sort of backdrop of this setup and universe. Well, maybe not even this universe, but just like, you know, this gameplay style, but just make it a little bit more fun and engaging, and less like derivative of other stuff. Like, take the things they make unique in this and kind of make something new. I think they'd actually be doing a lot better in terms of making more compelling gameplay experiences. It's like I'm basically just done with this one at this point. Like, you know, kind of doing the video and then just calling it a day on it, because I really don't want anything to do with the the rest of this adventure. Like, I could possibly beat the boss thing, but like the amount of work involved in gathering random stuff and, you know, retreading through this area I've already visited so many times, it's just, that appeal isn't there to me, especially at this moment where I've got, you know, so many other game options. I don't know. I'd say for the Souls crowd, you know, this is just another game, but you might like it because you're into the Souls stuff. If you're not into the Souls stuff, I think it's going to be a little harder and less interesting for you to dive into. And, yeah, that's really what this game is something, like, it's not what I expected, which is a bit of a shame, because I was kind of looking forward to it, and then I'm kind of in here and I'm like, oh, just another one of these. And that's not a great feeling for a game. You want the game to be fun, engaging, different, and, you know, intriguing, and this just really wasn't it for me. Like, there's points where I'm kind of like, there's glimpses of intrigue in that, and then the more I play it, the more I'm just kind of like, you know, wanting to move on from it. And I think that's not an ideal situation for a game that, you know, is supposed to entertain and make things intriguing and fun for you. And I'm sitting here just being like, oh, I can't wait for this to be wrapped up and move on from this, you know, because it's just another work job. And that's a shame because of all the time and the, you know, development and all that. I kind of almost like their effort with Ashen more, although I think this is probably a little bit more accessible than Ashen. But I do feel like they were doing some more interesting stuff with that one in terms of, like, you know, co-op dungeon puzzle stuff and Souls-likes, and yeah, I just don't really feel too positive about this experience, which is a bit of a shame, but that's how it goes. Not gonna love every game out there. I'm assuming you probably feel the same way too, but you know, it's part of the job to work and take a look at these things and present them to you and give you context and all that, so hopefully this kind of showcased to you what this game's all about and what it might have to offer for you if you're curious about diving in and facing death over and over again.